announcements and the presentation pitches. So keep eating. That's totally fine, but stop talking. So we're here thanks to our sponsors. Where did Sarah go? Where's Sarah? Sarah, there she is. Thank you, Sarah, and Tech Systems. And also, Techlahoma is our parent organization. So if you don't know, if this is your first time, Techlahoma is the statewide nonprofit that puts on 30 monthly meetups, 2 conferences, and a bunch of other free local events. So we get a lot of support from our community, and some of the ways you can support us are, so first of all, check out the Techlahoma meetups. And then the Techlahoma we now have a help wanted board, which I'll put in the channel. But these are some user group leaders or just Techlahoma organizers who need help with various tasks. We now have like a GitHub repo with issues, and they will be shown on this board here that just kind of says, oh, we need help doing this or help doing that. So if you've been wondering about just ways that you can volunteer to help out with Techlahoma, we're going to start putting them on here, and we'll start announcing this and putting it into our channels and everything. So keep an eye out for this to help get involved. And then if you want to help us pay for things, you can become a member. So at donate.techlahoma.org, you can do a single payment, you can do monthly payments, and that supports all of the meetups, all of the free workshops, and all that kind of stuff that we put on. Your company can also sponsor. So we have sponsorships available for companies at different levels. A year's worth of sponsorship gets you a year's worth of listing and credit and all that kind of good stuff. And then you can buy some merchandise from our store. So there's a Techlahoma store, which I think is just techlahoma.org/store. Your typical stuff, t-shirts that you can wear. And then we also have mugs and things like that. We might be getting new merchandise pretty soon. There's also, actually, I don't have the link on here, but if you have Amazon Prime, you get 1 free Twitch Prime channel. And if you can allocate that to the Techlahoma Twitch channel, and there's some amount of like the ads that are shown during our videos that we can get revenue from that or something. So if you have Amazon Prime or Twitch Prime, add the Techlahoma one to your Twitch Prime account. So that's Techlahoma, 36 Degrees North. They donate the space for us to meet, and they have a lot of free workshops, and they have co-working desks and offices that are available for a monthly fee. This Wednesday, Tom, am I right? This Wednesday is free co-working day? Yes. All right, so this Wednesday is free co-working day. If you've been wanting to check out 36 Degrees North and see what it's like to co-work here, come here on Wednesday. This space here is going to be open for free co-working. All you have to do is check in. That's it, right? All right, super easy. 36 Degrees North also has a calendar of events, and their newsletter is great. When you sign up at the front, you get just 1 email a week that tells you everything that's coming up. You can also check their calendar for, except that it uses a tracking script, so I have it blocked on my Firefox. Sorry about that. But other Techlahoma groups meet here, as well as some non-Techlahoma groups that are tech-related or startup-related, that kind of thing. So those are kind of our standard announcements. Also going right now is Thunder Plains 2018. The call for proposals is open. So Thunder Plains is a conference in Oklahoma City. It is a web and also JavaScript everywhere sort of conference. So it has a heavy JavaScript influence in it, but kind of tech everywhere. It's November 1st. It's in Oklahoma City. The call for proposals is open, so propose your talks there. The sponsorship prospectus is there, so if your company wants to get their name in front of a bunch of developers from across Oklahoma and the region, this is a great place to do it. So do that, and then also November 1st is the actual date, so put that on your calendar for Thunder Plains. Am I missing anything about Thunder Plains? It's still pretty early on it, so. Okay, so there is a How to Build a Website workshop by Tulsa Tech going on here at 36 on, I think it's every Thursday for the next few weeks. So check out the 36 Degrees North site for more on that. I already mentioned the free co-working, and then Railsbridge Tulsa. Wasim, you want to tell us about Railsbridge this weekend, right?
Yeah, this weekend it's at the Central Link.
Oh, Oops, okay.
There's 6 seats left.
So it's at Central Library, 6 seats are left. Any coaching spots left, or coach spots are all?
I mean, if a couple people want to join, yeah, but we're pretty good.
Cool. All right, I'm also repeating things that you all will say because the microphone is up here. So, sorry, Wasim. I'll mansplain over you. And then Tulsa UX July meetup. Max, where'd you go? You want to talk about that one?
We don't have a speaker yet, but it will be our 1-year anniversary. So we're going to figure out something fun to do between now and then. So.
All right, cool. So 1-year anniversary Tulsa UX. That's July 10th. July 16th. This is still a question mark, but just have in your mind we're probably going to do an OWASP chapter here in Tulsa. So if you know Nathan Sweeney, he does B-Sides OK. He and I are going to organize probably quarterly OWASP meetups. So just keep an eye on that. We'll let you know more details. It's not going to be July 16th. Sorry, that's old info. But then July 20th is Tulsa Tech Fest. So who's been to Tulsa Tech Fest before? All right. Oh, who's not been to Tulsa Tech Fest before? Wow. All right. So yeah, Tulsa Tech Fest is probably the longest running Tulsa Tech event in the city, I think. Anyone else been around long enough to remember the things before it happened? No? Okay, so what's that? Yeah, no one was alive then. So yeah, Tulsa Tech Fest is a really cool event. It's on a Friday, and it'll cover all kinds of technical tracks. So in the past, they've had tracks, everything from servers to clients to Internet of Things. It's just a huge technology fest. So that's going to be July 20th. So put that on your calendar. Yeah.
July 26th is Lambda Lunch.
July 26th is Tulsa Lambda Lunch. That's a Tuesday, and that's here. What else am I missing? When's that one?
21st, July 21st.
July 21st. All right, July 21st is Django Girls. Man, y'all gotta. What's that?
Need coaches.
And we need coaches? All right, so if you Python and Django, then sign up to be a coach. What? Wait, what?
Money.
Oh, and money. Okay, and sponsors. Money. All right, coaches, bring your own money to Django Girls. All right, which one are we talking about now? Okay, so I think that's all events. Any other events that I'm missing? All right. There's more announcements here.
Yeah, I think I've got the next 5.
Yeah, you do. Except I think Nathan and Diane are here for the other stuff, right?
Is Jill Webb here?
I don't
No,
see
maybe
Jill.
walking in.
Okay.
So, real quick.
You want to come stand by the microphone? So
Is there a microphone?
Yeah, and a camera. So
Oh my gosh.
There's a camera and a microphone and everything. So if you have not heard, Code for Tulsa launched the summer meals map last week, or actually about 10 days ago-ish. But we still need help. So if you go to that link on GitHub, it takes you straight to the issues. And if you're interested in helping out, I know we've gotten a couple of messages on Twitter and a couple of messages through our email list of people wanting to know how to help with Summer Meals Map. The list of issues is on GitHub, and just jump right in. And if you're familiar with JavaScript, or even if you'd like to learn some JavaScript, this is a great little project for you to learn, and you can keep in touch with us on GitHub. The other thing that we are about to start, and we don't even know what this project looks like yet, but the Tulsa Advocates for the Protection of Children is wanting to meet with us on July 5th. So if you're free at around lunchtime on July 5th and haven't partied too hard on the 4th of July, then we'd love to have you. And it's really just a conversation with them on how we can help their organization in a similar fashion to the way we helped Hunger Free. And so that's a little bit more information about that. Code for Muskogee.
So I'm really upset over seeing all of the articles that Oklahoma is the one of the global incarcerations, and we've got to school about that. So we've been discussing that Oklahoma Muskogee will be out statewide. So we're going to have a breakout session around to discuss that.
Yep. So if you're interested in helping out with that, there'll be a breakout session for Code for Muskogee. What else do we have today? Okay, so Jill Webb isn't here, but she, if you're familiar with any of the Code for Tulsa stuff, she's been here in the past pitching projects. She's the one who kind of got us started on the CourtBot journey, which is a reminder system for helping people know when their upcoming court dates are. She's got another idea, and it involves scraping OSCN data. And so if you're interested in that and know Python better than I know Python, which is I know nothing about Python, then help us out on that link. I've got some background reading and research that I've done thus far, and actually like a little bit of a scraping thing that I've managed to get to work from home on a weekend. But we definitely need more help. So if you're interested in scraping data with Python, and or you're interested in criminal justice issues, hit us up. Nathan is here with Tulsa Permaculture. Nathan, come on up.
Hey guys. So permaculture is, I figured I was too tall for that, is permanent agriculture. And so it's pretty cool. I think you guys would probably like it if you got into it. It's kind of looking at agriculture as from a systems theory design perspective, and like how everything can work together when you add all this diversity in and the complexity. And then basically the goal is for you to create a system that supports itself, and you can actually sit in a hammock and watch the food grow and then pick it. That's kind of the goal of permaculture, and so we've been implementing that here north of Tulsa, north of downtown, just north of the freeway. We have several different projects going. We've got a 500 tree area along the Tisdale Expressway going north of here, and so it's got fruit, nut trees, and just a bunch of different species to support itself, and it's supported itself for 4 years now. So it's been really cool to watch it work without much help from humans. And then we're doing a 20-acre development at the new Emerson Montessori School just north of downtown. And so we're doing a native prairie, native forest, and actually a half-acre farm, and then a bunch of food forest stuff. Lots of other things going on over here, but what inspired this ecosystem tool was actually chiggers. And I don't know if any of you have experienced chiggers, but they're not fun. Got a few. And so my question was, we don't use chemicals to deal with stuff because we actually want the pests there so they can actually bring in other predators and beneficial insects and feed them. So with chiggers, we're like, well, what actually does predate on chiggers, and how can we encourage those things to come into the system? And so that's where I started building this tool, and I just use Tableau because I know Tableau. I'm not like an awesome coder or anything, but do I just click here? Okay. And then kind of connected it to Wikipedia. So yeah, you can either start with the animal or with the plant, and then basically you just click on an animal and it'll show you its food, its habitat, its predators, and its prey. And so if you want, it's taking a minute. There we go. And then you can, like, if you want to check out one of the predators, you can just click on that, and then it pulls it up on Wikipedia. Right? Oh yeah, it's already there. Yeah, so with chiggers, you would just type in chiggers, and anyway, so that's the database side. I think, this is very small at this point, but it's all looking at the native plants and trees and wildlife for Tulsa. The native side is very important. We used to have beautiful American elms lining 15th Street, and all of them are dead because of the Dutch elm disease, which was brought in from Asia, because people don't use native trees. And also the ash trees in Tulsa, we have about 250,000 of them, and they are all about to go extinct because of the emerald ash borer, which is a big thing that Up With Trees is trying to mitigate. and I'm on the board of Up the Trees, and it's a big deal. So we really like native species. They also provide all the food for native habitat. So, like if you look at an oak tree, it supports 500 different types of caterpillars. A Bradford pear supports none. So, just kind of, it's very important to bring in just the native species, in my opinion. So anyway, this is all native, and we just need help, I think, scraping some larger websites to get a lot more information into this database that I'm building, and I think that's about it. Carlos just wanted me to come show it to you guys.
How do people get a hold of you if they want to help out with this?
Let's see. Restoration Collective Tulsa is the nonprofit that I'm working under mainly, and it's restorationcollectivetulsa.org. And I'm Nathan Picardo.
Thanks.
Good.
I'm not that tall. Where is it? Ah, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to internet. Ah, I found it. Okay, I think that's it for what? Ah,
Sorry.
oh, did you have to refresh? Do I need to refresh? Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot.
Women's Code Tulsa is Sunday at 2 Intro to HTML and CSS at Hardesty Library.
Women Who Code Tulsa, Sunday, what time?
At 2.
At 2 at Hardesty Library, and it is Intro to HTML and CSS? Okay, just for the microphone too. So hopefully the microphone picked that up. All right, now I think that's it. That really is it. Is it?
Should I do it now or during the breakout session?
Oh, you can, well, yeah, pitch it during the breakout session. Okay, so we'll talk about all the breakout sessions. Tulsa Ruby, where's Nestor? You gotta give us the 1 or 2 sentence pitch for the Ruby talk.
Railsbridge is this coming weekend, and I thought I would leverage some of the work that we're going to talk about that and give a quick, very surface level intro to both Ruby and Rails if anybody's interested. So that's what we talk about.
Okay. So the Tulsa Ruby talk will be a quick intro to Ruby and Rails. Code for Muskogee. Diana, did you have a pitch for that? Anything else to say?
Yeah, just like I said earlier, we're just, Matt Williams and I have already been discussing it a little bit, and we just like feedback from other people on things that we might need to figure out, and if there's any questions, we can answer.
Okay. So yep, just a discussion about rolling Corpbot statewide, rolling it out statewide. I'm gonna skip Django for a second. Max, what's the UX talk? Yes, if you want to run up here, I didn't want to make everybody have to run up here.
Okay, so I'm a Tulsa UX, and we are applying Tulsa to be the host city for the 2019 Midwest UX Conference. They have an RFP, so I'm just working on a document. So literally, we're just going to be writing why Tulsa and some certain things. I've got a lot of it already done, but wanted some more input from the community, so I'm going to be working on that. Here.
Cool. And then you want to talk about so there's a Django talk here. If people are interested in the Django talk, I started a web application security with Django. So if you're into Django and security stuff, I only have like 3/10 of it done. So it will be a very short thing. I don't expect a lot of people to get into it. But if you're only here for Django, then there is Django something on the menu. That's all I have for Django. Do we have anything else for Django, Patrick? Where'd you go?
No, it's just you.
Okay. Awesome.
I can do a Q&A if there's people.
Yeah, and then we can do just general Django Q&A after that.
So, as of today, as Luke has generously pointed out multiple times, we are starting to do streaming in Tulsa. Because of a few rule changes here at 36, we actually need anyone who is a user group leader or is interested in bringing their user group into streaming, we have to teach you how to use the device, set up your YouTube accounts correctly, and make sure all the keys and whatnot are loaded in correctly. So today, for those of you who are interested, this is a non-committal thing. You don't have to do streaming if you come to this meeting, but if you are interested, I would really appreciate it if you came, because I'm just going to give the basics of what will be happening, what you'll need to set up, and who you'll need to talk to. But if you're interested in bringing your user group into the Tulsa streaming fold and using the equipment, going to have a little breakout for that.
All right. Anything else? Any other breakouts? Topics? No? Okay. So we have Ruby, Cortbot, UX, Broadcast, and Django are the 5 things on the menu. So I'm just going to get a poll of the room to see how many people are interested in which ones, just so we know which rooms we might need to use. So how many people are interested in the Ruby and Rails intro talk? That looks like about 10 or 11. And then how many in the Cortbot? 6. Okay, 6. How many in a Django talk? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then UX? And then broadcast streaming? About 3. Okay, so Ruby's going to be in the big one, and the rest of us, I guess, just have to wrestle over all of the other rooms because we're about the same size. So, yeah. So, anyway, we'll do Ruby in the big one. Let's do, what was the next one? Cortbot, maybe right here in Video North. Let's do the Django talk in the boardroom, the UX talk back here down this hall in the small conference room.
I'll take those interested we can use the seating area.
Okay, and then Blixit will take anyone who's interested in broadcast stuff to the seating area in the back. So Ruby is in here, Cortbot is in Video North, Django is in boardroom, UX is in the small conference room, and find Blixa to go to the streaming or broadcast room. So that's it. Grab some food and get started. Thanks for coming out. Ruby. It's Nestor, who is sitting across from Wasim. He has the beard. He has the blue and white plaid. He has the beard. Oh, yeah.
It's been a while since we had a chance to talk.
Yeah.
We met at Thunder Plains.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I've been. Yeah, it's been great. Yeah. There's a Slack channel for technology.
Yes, there's a Technology Slack team, and then there's channels for, like, there's a Tulsa channel, there's a Red Dead channel, yeah, there's a bunch of different channels.
Are you the best person to get added
get on the
or
Slack?
find out into the...
Yeah, so you should be able to invite yourself.
Okay.
If you go to slack.techlahoma.org. So if you go to slack.techlahoma.org, you should be able to just enter in your own email address there.
Is it something I can do from the mobile app, or I have to be on the...
I think you have to go to the website to do this invite.
Okay.
But then once you get the invite, you'll be able to sign in with your mobile app.
All right.
Yeah, because this will get you an invite, and you can set up your username and password.
Okay. The other thing is, if I wanted to do like a short talk, like Nathan did, because I'm putting in a nonprofit.
Yeah.
We have the sun is in my pocket. We have a space, and we're finalizing our funding for the fall.
Cool.
Having 15 kids, we're gonna do iOS development.
Through what?
iOS.
Oh, okay, cool.
Mobile
Very cool.
development.
Yeah, that's very cool.
15 kids. The app development, but also project management. and entrepreneurship.
Oh, very cool.
Have them create some maps.
Yeah.
Learn how to put it.
Is it here in Tulsa or is
It's
that
gonna be here in Tulsa.
Okay, awesome.
Housed at TCC at the C4C, the Center for
The one down here?
Mhm.
Yeah, the one downtown. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very
so,
cool.
wanted to see if there's any interest.
Yeah.
And
And I would say there's also, so one of the channels on the Techlahoma Slack. Well, here, you know what? Let's do this. Let me just invite you straight to this channel.
No, you're good. You're good. He's actually not plugged in right now.
how you been?
Pretty good. Staying busy. I just had a baby. In the boardroom? Is that, yeah.
Congrats. How old is he or she?
A week and
Oh, and
2 or 3
this
days.
is a new baby.
Yeah, brand new,
Oh,
yeah.
Congratulations.
All right, here, actually, so what's your email address? I'll add you straight to
It's
this.
MIKEAL BAUGHN. B is in Victor. Oh, B is in Victor.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you good.
VA.
UG. Oh, BAU.
Oh, Vaughn.
Yeah, GHN at Gmail.
Cool, so I'll do that one and maybe Tulsa. So I'll just invite you, and there's this, the one channel specific I'm inviting you to is called CS Mentor.
Okay.
So this is also a channel that we share with Tulsa Regional STEM Alliance.
Okay.
So we do some, anytime the TRSA is like looking for people from Techlahoma to go talk to kids or
Yeah.
promote with kids or something like
Awesome.
that. That's the channel where we do
Yes.
that. So that's kind of the perfect channel where you'll find the people who are into that stuff.
Brilliant.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Good to see you. I know I haven't been to a meeting in a minute.
Yeah.
I switched jobs. I work in Tulsa Middle School now.
Oh, okay.
And it's been a steep learning curve. Yeah, very steep.
All right.
Good
Cool.
to see
Well, thanks
you,
for coming
man.
by. Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that project. What's the project called?
It's called Urban Coders Guild.
Okay, cool.
So the old school guilds
Yeah.
start with apprentices.
Yeah.
Later
Yes.
have them teach.
I am a fan of the apprenticeship model. Definitely. That's cool. Glad to hear about it, man.
No, so I just network with people and kind of see what everybody's doing. So I am a software enrollment fun stuff, but yeah. So this is my I'm here to learn, what's going on in software development, what Where'd you move from? See, I'm from Georgia.
Something else I noticed and remembered while you were out. Try not to hit the table or stomp. It gets picked up.
Okay.
Like a light tap's okay. Doing like this or doing this gets picked up.
I mean,
It's
that's
not terrible if you do it.
That's 50% of my talk. Is stomping around. So I don't know.
Well, if you're stomping around, you're probably getting away from the camera too. So
Okay.
yeah, we're trying to avoid ending up with a bunch of unusable audio. And the last stream we did, we had that problem.
Do I need to do anything to get it started, or is it running?
It is already running. I just need to make sure you're lined up on the camera there.
Okay.
Go.
Oh, I guess I can't really move that at all.
Huh?
Once it's set up, I can't really move this at all, can I?
Well, move it where you want it now.
Yeah,
and we
that's.
can
I was
reset it.
trying to find that. Okay.
Yeah. Is that good?
That works.
Okay.
I will start moving around in a second.
Okay. Well. Do you want it more centered on your laptop or on the podium there? Which would work better for you?
Oh, I don't know. This is probably going to be my stance.
Like that? Okay.
Yeah, so.
So I will center it on your laptop then. That puts you in frame. Right there.
Okay. Oh, and I can see if I need to
Yeah.
scoot over.
Go ahead and plug in your laptop now so we can make sure it connects.
Sure.
It's not live, so you can.
Gotcha.
You don't have to worry. Yeah.
should be. I gotta get this thing mirroring.
Ooh, nice background there. Is that built into the latest version, or is that?
The background?
Yeah.
No, I've been carrying that around for several years now.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm curious if you could give me a copy of that.
Sure. Okay. So let us do that. And do.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Got it?
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
Are you not able to mirror?
I am, but I was gonna have a lot of notes and stuff on here, but let me just do that.
I mean, it's whatever works for you.
Yeah. No, it's fine.
I can also leave this monitor turned around so you can see it. That would help. Does that help at all?
Oh,
You can
yeah.
see yourself in there as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I'll leave that there for you. Just let me know when you're ready to go.
Will do. Let me, why am I... Oh. Okay. Gotcha. It's there. Okay. And then we can do that, and I can do that, and I can do that. Oh, Jesus. Okay. Okay.
There you go.
Yes, I'm actually gonna leave that out because that's gonna bankrupt that.
Whenever you're ready. Right, yeah.
We good?
Yeah.
Awesome.
There is, you don't know already.
Well, hello everybody. Is it us four? Okay. 4 is less than 10, but I'll take it.
It happens.
Hello. All right. Well, I'm just gonna kind of run you guys through a very, very surface level intro to Ruby, the Ruby language, and the Rails framework. We're really gonna go mostly into the Ruby language, and we're just kind of gonna go just a little bit into what Rails is and how it works and what it can do for you and the kind of time savings that you get out of it, etc. And then, oh, is there?
We don't have a microphone.
Okay. What do I need to do anything when I'm done?
No.
Okay.
We got it.
Cool. There is no mic, so you may need to move up. We have another group over there, so I'm reluctant to just yell everything. In any case, let's get started. I am Nestor Custodio, or Nestor Castillo, if you got the meetup invite. I work for Tulsa Public Schools. I'm with the applications development team there that they're spinning up. We're doing a lot of interesting things, and I'm kind of the first hire in the push to get a development team stood up over there.
Do you use Rails on a daily basis at work?
I do use Rails on a daily basis at work, and I'm doing everything I can to grow our use of both Rails and Ruby.
No, it's great.
Yeah, I've already actually gotten a couple of jumps out as part of projects for work.
Nice.
Yeah. So this is a really quick crash course that is intended to last no more than 45 minutes. We'll see. I'm kind of probably going to go into a little more detail here since we have a little more time than that. First things first, credit where it's due. Rails was put together by David Hansen, who is described by some people as a very nice young man. And by people who know him as David Hansen. He put this together back in 2003 as part of a project he was building up called Basecamp for a company that he was hired to do some contract work for, I believe. The project was made open source in 2004 and hit 1.0 in 2005. It's still in active development. There's still regular releases to Rails, so it's been around for almost 15 years now, but it's still seeing development. There's still new features being added. They're still finding ways to make the system better, to make it more user-friendly, to have it save you more time as you're using it. And that's that. Now, what Rails is Rails is an opinionated framework for web development. Application development could be websites, it could be services, it could also be other things. There are other needs that Rails can fulfill aside from web development, but that's mostly what we're going to be talking about today. And by opinionated, I mean that the guy that came up with Rails is he is not a soft-spoken individual, which is bad and good. It's bad because, if it's good to hear a lot of opinions when you're coming up with a project the scale that Rails is. But it's good because when you get 100 people in a room and you tell them, go solve this problem, you're going to get 100 different solutions. And people are going to spend most of their time arguing for which is the right way to do it. And next thing you know, you're out of time and nothing was actually solved or accomplished. So that's one of... Yes, exactly. That's one of the really nice things about Rails. There's not a whole lot of discussion about how to do something. It's anything that you could possibly have a question about what is the right way to approach this. Rails has a guideline for you. This is the right way to write the code. This is the correct way to approach this problem. This is the tool that you should use to solve that need. And so it takes a lot of the, I don't want to say discussion and I don't want to say thinking, but it takes a lot of the decision making out of it. Yeah, a lot of the decision making and a lot of the back and forth that you would need to have otherwise about it, it's just completely pulled out of the process for you. Now, the Rails framework itself, a framework is a set of tools and guidelines. Guidelines are what save you time. Tools are the things that you need to use to have those guidelines make sense. You can come up with a system and say, these are the rules for how you need to do things, because you have a set of tools that expect things to be done that way, and they will help you achieve that goal. We'll go over what some of those tools are specifically in a bit. See here. Now, what Rails is not. Rails is not a programming language. Rails is a framework, and it is written in Ruby. Ruby is the programming language. Rails is written in Ruby. There are a lot of other tools like Rails that are written in Ruby. Rails is really useful, but if you can't read and write Ruby, you're only going to get so much out of it. It's like opening up a Word doc and selecting that you want to start a new business letter template. And the template is the tool that it kind of emulates Ruby in the sense. The template fills in a lot of filler text for you, and it formats things nicely, etc. But if you can't read the language that business letter template is written in, if you can't read English, if somebody hands you a business letter template in German and you don't read German, you're not going to really get anything out of it. You can't read what the filler text is. You can't read the hints that it's telling you to fill in the stuff. And honestly, if you can't write German, you can't write a business letter in German, period. And so that's where you really need an understanding of the Ruby language under the hood to be able to get anywhere with Rails. Now, Ruby is written such that it's very easy to read, but if you don't know how to write it, you're going to have a really hard time putting things together on your own. Okay, now we're talking about Ruby. So again, credit where it's due. Ruby was originally conceived in '93 by a guy named Yukihiro Matsumoto, who goes by Mats online. He's a very nice gentleman. And the Ruby language was originally conceptualized as a truly object-oriented language from the beginning. There are a lot of programming languages out there. They all have their pros and cons. And they generally fall into one of maybe 3 or 4 buckets that we classify programming languages into, which is procedural, object-oriented, functional, and whatever the next hottest thing that somebody comes up with is going to be, because people are constantly thinking up of new ways to write stuff. Object-oriented programming has a lot of advantages. There are a lot of people who will argue for procedural programming and functional programming. So it's about how you think. It's about how your brain perceives the problem and how you approach a solution. I find that Ruby, because it's very easy to read and it's very easy to write, and because it takes so little effort to get it to do a lot of things, I find that it's a really, really useful tool to have under your belt. Even if you should decide that Ruby is not the language for you, if you ever do decide to read up on it or stick with this, I think you'll get a lot out of it. And then on to actually Ruby. Now, when you install Ruby on a system, and that's kind of outside the scope of this talk, there's countless resources online for how to install Ruby on your computer. But when you install Ruby, you get three things out of it. You get the Ruby engine, which you can throw a file at and say, please run this for me. You get a gem executable, which lets you manage the Ruby packages, which we're not really going to be getting into. And you get IRB, which is the interactive Ruby interpreter, which is what you see on screen here on the left. It lets you issue Ruby commands one at a time and just get their output right away. So you can see exactly what your code is doing as you do things. Now, Ruby as a programming language that is object-oriented is at its core an engine for generating values. Everything you do in Ruby generates a value, and everything you do is manipulating values. What is a value? A value is anything that a computer can possibly understand. Text, numbers, true and false values, your address, images, videos, anything you have ever used a computer to do, that is a value in one way or another. YouTube videos, Twitter posts, Instagram like data, comments on a blog post. Those are all pieces of data that are all representable in the Ruby language as unique values that you can do something with. The code you write when you write Ruby code is a value. The Rails framework itself is a value in Ruby. Everything in Ruby is a value, and that's a big takeaway here, because once you really get that through your head, that's where you really get to extract value out of the language. Now, what can Ruby let you do? Or how do you write Ruby, rather? We're going to kind of take a very bottom-up approach here and just start with the very, very basics and build up on that. So some of the things that Ruby knows about in terms of values are true and false, which every computer can understand even down to its very core. The values by themselves are they're not really useful, but again, this is a very bottom-up approach where we're just looking at the most basic possible thing that you can do, and we're going to build on that. Other values you can throw at Ruby and have it understand are numbers. You can also give it fractional numbers. There are things you can do to even have Ruby understand fractions that are written as actual fractions, not decimal numbers. I haven't loaded that on my system right now, and I don't believe it does that out of the box. So I guess I can do that and see what happens. Yeah, it's not going to take it. But Ruby will let you work with fractions as fractions if you need it to. If what you're doing is mathematical in nature and you don't want to lose precision due to converting fractions to decimals very early on in the process, Ruby will accommodate that. Text. Ruby will handle text, and it is a value like any other. Text, when you give it to Ruby, is written. Text is generally in programming referred to as strings, and strings are given to Ruby in quotes. Those can be single quotes or they can be double quotes. There is a difference between them, but we're not really going to go into that right now. Again, this is kind of a surface level approach. The next level up in terms of complexity of what you can do is ask Ruby to do things. And the most basic way that you can do that is by using the puts command. Put stands for put string, and it will literally put whatever value you give it, turn it into a string, aka text, so that it can print it on screen. So I can put hello, and Ruby will say back at me hello, and then you get that arrow nil. And you'll notice on the console here, everything you do, everything you say, everything you ask will always have this arrow with a value after it. This is the result of what you have asked Ruby to do. Everything generates a value. And you may not need anything, that value may not be useful to you. You may just be asking Ruby to do something, but it will give you back a value. And whether you find that useful or not is up to you.
A
You don't.
return value.
Sorry?
A return value.
A return value. Everything you do will return a value to you. If I say 5, it'll say, okay, here's the value that I can do. The only value I could possibly give you back out of that is 5. If I say...
do several things in a row?
We're getting there. If I say my string, it will say this is the only sensible thing for me to give you back is my string. When I say puts hello, what I get back is nil, and we're going to go into what nil means. But note that between my saying puts hello and it saying, okay, I'm done, here's a value for you, it has printed hello to the screen as I had requested. Now the next level up in complexity is what we call expressions. This is combining values to do useful things. 3 plus 5. 10 times 12. You can do this with text. Hello plus there. And it will add two strings together to, which it can only interpret as, I guess you want me to put these two things together. Ruby will always make a best effort attempt to understand what it is that you're requesting it to do. When what you ask it to do does not make sense, it will let you know. Hello plus 3 generates a value that is an error, and it is this type error. It says, I don't know how to turn a number into a string. So I've asked it to add a string to something else. It goes, well, I guess you want me to put these two things together, but I don't know how to turn this number into a string, so I can't really do that. And so the output to that, the value I get back, like nil or my string nil, is this error, which is itself a value. This is
hello times 3.
Sorry?
Hello times 3.
Man, you got it, man. I can't say hello times 3, and Ruby does know what to do with that. It will say hello, hello, hello. I said, hey, I want hello 3 times. So I said, okay. And that is the value that you get out of that. This is where expressions are, this is why they're useful. Because everything you do is just manipulating values, combining values is at the very root of that idea. And now you've already seen me use some operators. Mostly what you've seen here is mathematical operators. Plus 12 minus 3. So you have plus, minus, you've seen multiplication there, 3 times 5. There is division, which in most programming languages is represented by a forward slash. 20 divided by 2 is 10. And then the last operator we're going to look at right now is equals, which in math, when you say 3 plus 5 equals 8, that is just, the equals there stands for a, here's what that is. Here's the output. In most programming languages, Ruby included, equals takes on a slightly different meaning. Equals is not an explanation, but an assignment. If I say 3 plus 5, that tells me it's 8, but I can't really use that value anymore. It's ephemeral, it's disappeared. Ruby told me what the output of my operation was, but I can't do anything with that. It's already happened. One thing I can do is give that value a name so that I can use it later. That is where assignment comes in. If I say 3 plus 5 equals 3 plus 5, it will still generate a result value because everything does that. But in addition to that, what I have done is I have assigned that value 8 to a variable, is what we call them, whose name is 3 plus 5 and whose value is now 8. So that I can say, now I can ask after the fact, what's 5 times 3 plus 5? And it will substitute the value 8 in place of the name of this variable. And then it will multiply by 5 and give me back my 40. And I may at this point choose to assign that to a different variable to do something else with it down the line. You can also say, and I'm going to use x a lot here just because it's quick to type, but I'm going to say x is 10, and then I can say x times 2 is 20. I can also say x equals x times 2. X times 2 happens first. It says 10 times 2 is 20. And I am then asking for that value 20 to be assigned to the variable x again. Now the value of x is 20.
What happened to the old value?
The fact that X used to be 10 is now gone, is now lost to history. I have explicitly requested that I want the name X to refer to this new value. What it used to be is not really important. If that was of use to me, if I wanted to retain some kind of memory of what X used to be, I would have to create a second variable to hold old X. And I could call that anything I like. If I say X is 10, I can say old X is X. I will say, oh, okay, well, you want to store the value of X, which is 10, and call it also old X. So now both X and old X are 10. And now I can say X equals X times 2, and X is 20. And I still have the old X value on hand in case I want to do something with it down the line. This is a very rare construct. You'll very rarely take a value and change it and still want to know what the old value was, but it's something you can certainly do. In most cases where you need to do something like that, there is an easier construct that exists around doing a thing and letting you do something else with the old value without making it your job to keep track of both. Next on the list, arrays. We're looking at values, strings, text, true, false. The next step up in complexity is lists of things. A list of things in programming speak is an array. And an array in Ruby specifically is a list of any things. And you denote an array with square brackets. What you see there is an empty array. It's a list with no things in it. I can have a list with numbers in it. And I would do that by separating them with commas. The return value there is, oh, I have an array with these values in it. The values don't all have to be the same type of thing. I can have an array that has true and false and some numbers and some text. If I want, I can throw a variable in there. Last time we saw X, it was 20. So my array, when you see the output of this long list of things that I'm building, will have a 20 in it now in that position. And there's no reason for having these things separated and having true, false, and then numbers, and then strings. This is just a list of things, and they can be any things you want. I'm going to run that same command again and assign it to a variable that I'm calling my array. And now that list has a name. It's called my array. I'm now going to create a new array that has 45 in it and the text hello. And also, because everything is a value and an array is a list of any values you want, I'm going to throw my array in there, because that's a perfectly legit value to throw in a list of values. And then I'm going to throw last word, just so that you can see that there was something after that. And so here's an array with the 45 and the hello, and then the single value that is this array, that was this guy, and you can see that it has its own set of square brackets. And then after that is the last word. Building lists of things is a very useful thing to do. Even more useful is performing an operation, doing a thing with a list of values. There's a lot that you can do there. This is how you work with database data. This is how you work with, say, a list of every, when you go to your browser and you go to Twitter and you do a search on hashtag crazy movie thing that's going on today. What's going on behind the scenes is some process is generating a list of all the tweets that have the hashtag crazy movie thing that's going on today in them. At some point, some program is dealing with an array and then doing the same thing with each value, that thing being returning it to you as a one of many search results or something like that. Sorry. Now, next step up in complexity is combining operations, so that when you want to do the same thing many times, like if you want to do the same thing with each of these values, you don't want to type in the same thing 50 times because you have a list with 50 values. Also, what happens if your list has 56 values instead? Now you got to go back and add 6 more instances of that thing. The solution to that problem is methods, which is the name we give to a collection of statements. In Ruby, you define a method with the def keyword, and you give that method a name like add, and then you give it the names of, now when you want that method to run the statements that you have given it, the term for that is calling. You call the method. When you call a method, you may or may not pass any number of values that it needs to do its job. I am here going to define a method called add that takes two things, adds them together, and gives you back what the sum of those things is. So I'm going to call it add, and I need names as placeholders for the two values that I'm going to be given when you call add, and you want me to add two things together. So I'm going to call them, in fact, I'm not going to call them x and y. I'm going to call them first value and second value. These are the names when you call add and ask add to do whatever it is that it does. These are the names internally that it's going to refer to those two values as. So I've defined add, and what add does is it takes the first value you gave it and it adds the second value. And then it gives you that back. In fact, I'm going to do that again. And I'm going to do this. Add is going to return, when you call it, the first value added to the second value. That's what you are going to expect to get back out of add. So now I can ask Ruby to add 3 and 5. And it will call the add method that I've just defined, which takes the first value I gave it and the second value I gave it, and it returns to me that sum. And that's what I've got here. Yes?
Does spacing matter? Does that return have to be, or is it just looking for the end after the def?
The spacing does not matter. The question was, does the indentation inside the method definition matter? It does not. In some languages, indentation is important, and it's syntactically important. You can't leave it out or it will crash or not run like you expect. In Ruby, that is not the case. The indentation is there for your benefit so that you can more easily visually spot where things begin and end. In fact, if I say def XYZ, I'm just going to declare a new method. You'll notice that even though IRB, which is again the interpreter I'm running, even though it knows that I'm in the middle of defining something and it has incremented this to 1, because if you notice here, all these statements that I issue one at a time have a 0. You're always at the 0th statement in that chain of things that you're asking it to do, and it just runs them one at a time. Once I say def, I am starting a new chain of things, and it will start counting up here for every new line. So even though IRB is very much aware that I'm in the middle of defining a method, it has not indented on my behalf, because it knows at the end of the day it doesn't matter. It doesn't care. Def XYZ returns nothing, because why would you call XYZ? Incidentally, if I call XYZ, what I get back is nothing because of a typo. But when you call a method, whatever that return value is the value that you will have returned for that statement, that command. Now, you may have noticed the very first time that I defined add, I actually did it like this. By default, Ruby, if it does not ever see a return, whatever the very last value it had on hand at the end of the method is what it returns implicitly. So you can also define add like this with no return in it. Ruby will just start executing commands, and when it gets to the last one, if it gets to the end of a method, whatever value it has at that point, that's what the method returns. In the case of a method as simple as this, it's easier to just leave it out. Most people by convention will not say return when they're writing Ruby, unless you need to return out of the middle of a method, unless you can't get to the end. And you'll see an example of that later on when we get to conditionals. Spoiler alert. Now I have here in my notes some other examples of methods that we can define. I'm gonna run through one more real quickly. I'm gonna call it put together, and it's gonna take a string 1 and string 2, and it's going to return string 1 plus string 2. Ah, shoot. Let's do that again. But type it correctly this time. And now when I call put together and I give it 2 strings, first and then second, what I get back is first, second. Now, different method name, different variable names, but functionally, this is the same thing as what we did with add. So I could actually say add first to second, and I should expect the same result. It's doing the same thing, even though everything has a different name, even though the method itself has a different name, even though the variables that it's using internally have different names, it's the same operation. And so they are functionally equivalent. And if you dig down, way down deep into the inner workings of Ruby, you'll see that it actually, what I'm typing translates into the exact same machine code. Okay, so more literals. We saw true, false, we saw numbers, we saw strings, we saw arrays, which added a level of complexity. The next level up is hashes. A hash is like an array in that it is a list of values, but these values are named. In an array, it was just a list, it's just a bucket of values that you decided to throw together so that you could call them all by one name when you assign that array to a variable. With the hash, you get to group all these values together like in an array, but you get to give them a name. And you denote a hash with curly braces like that, and what I've just done is defined an empty hash. It's a list of named things that doesn't have any things in it right now. But I can say thing 1, and I'm gonna say thing 1 is the value 23, and thing 2 is the value 45. I now have a hash that has 2 things in it, but they are named. This is incredibly useful. It's very useful for grouping values together without losing track of their significance, what each value is. If you have a list of 100 things that are all the same, they don't really need unique names. But if I have a list of things that are your personal info, like your name, your birthday, your address, all sorts of that kind of stuff, it's important to keep track of what these things are. Because when I see Smith, when I'm looking at that list and I see the value Smith, is that a first name? Is it a last name? Is that the name of your street? Is that maybe a password for something? It's really important to assign things names sometimes. So that's where hashes come in really handy. And as you saw, the construct for building a hash is you have your curly brace, so that Ruby knows you're defining a hash. And then you have what is called a key, and this is the name you're giving the value, and then the value, and in between is an equals greater than. It's hard to see with this projector, but that's what that symbol is. We're going to start pulling things out of arrays and hashes shortly. And again, a hash is a list of named things, and those things can be anything. So I can have here a hash that has a value that is a number, and a value that is a string, and a value that is an array, and a value that is a hash. Oh my gosh. And then one last thing. I like to add one last thing when I do these kind of things, mostly because otherwise you would get a curly brace at the end, and that can make it hard to understand what's going on. So I always like to add that last word or that extra value in there. That's why you see me doing that. I really wish you guys could read that better with as much light as is hitting it. And then the next type of value that we're going to look at is symbols. You can think of a symbol as a string with less bells and whistles. What those bells and whistles are, we haven't touched on yet, but we will be getting to soon. But just know that a symbol is like a string, but instead of writing it in quotes, In Ruby, a symbol is denoted by a colon. So that looks like a string, but note it's not in quotes. It's a colon hello. That tells you this is a symbol. And again, we'll get to the significance of that very shortly here. And then one last value, and that is nil, which you've seen countless times as I've been issuing commands. Nil is the value that does not mean anything. Nil is the answer to what is the value that is right now stored in variable Nestor. Well, I haven't defined a variable Nestor. Oh, well, it's going to complain because it doesn't know what Nestor is. I'm trying to think of something that will return nil. Here, this is kind of a cheat, but I'm going to do that. I've given Ruby an empty array and asked it a question about it. And what exactly the syntax is the very next thing we're going to talk about. But basically, I've asked it, what is the first thing on this list? What's an empty list? So I don't have a value to give you. Ruby's way of relaying that to me is to tell me, oh, well, that's nil. Nil is the value that doesn't have any value, basically. There's no other way to put it. There's no other way to put it. But it is important. It's a value that's not a value, but it still counts in certain cases, and we'll get to some of those cases in a second here. And so, okay. Oh, geez. Next step up in complexity, a class. We're not going to be defining any classes here, but it's important for you to understand what a class is when you're talking about Ruby. A class is a set of related values and code snippets. You've seen that a value can have a name, which is the variable, and you've seen that you can write methods that will run multiple statements. You can combine related values and methods and give them a name as a combined package. Sorry, that wasn't an emerald bam. When you package values and methods like that, that's called a class. A class is a type of thing. Every value is a class. Every value has a type in programming speak. And because everything in Ruby is a value, everything in Ruby has a class associated with it. The takeaway from that is, because everything has a class tied to it, everything has methods that you can call. Like when we defined add and put together, every value in Ruby has things that you can ask it to do. And those are methods that belong to the class for that type. It's a little easier to understand when you see it in action. So let's say one of the methods that Ruby makes available is called methods. So let's say hello and the way you call a method is with this dot notation. This is a value, and it has a type. It has a class. So what I'm saying is, hey, value, I want you to run the method named methods in your class. And what that does is it gives me back a list of all the methods in that class. This is one of the great things about Ruby, because it's not just an interpreted language, but it's very introspective. You can ask Ruby questions about themselves that are further down than the level that a lot of other languages let you get at. It's very hard to get other languages to give you a list of what are all the methods that this object knows about. Ruby just puts that out right up front for you. You may or may not have a use for it. You may or may not have a desire to peek in there, but they are available. So every object in Ruby has a methods method, and it will give you back a list, again an array, of the names of all the methods that I can make use of for the value hello. Notice that it gives it back to me as symbols. So every single one of these things here is a thing that I can tack onto that after a dot. So I can say hello dot, I'm just going to pick a thing here, to C. It's that guy over there. It's a thing I can ask hello to do, and it will do it. And this is the return value. What that means, I can go into what that means. That was probably a really bad example. Let's pick a different one. Split. Split does things with a string and it gives you back an array. And so I said, hey, hello, I want you to split. And it goes, oh, okay, here's what you're looking for. What split means is kind of outside the, it's not, say what?
Can't you pass it like a punctuation?
Yeah, I can say split, I can do that. Yeah. So now I've not just asked hello to split, I've asked hello to split and given it a value. Again, split is a method, and methods can take values that they use internally to do whatever it is that you need them to do. The split method on a string will break it up into different chunks. So I can split a sentence. If I have a string that's a sentence, I can split it on the spaces and get back a list of words. In this case, I've said I want to split on nothing, and when Ruby sees that, it goes, oh, okay, well, there's a nothing between the H and E in hello, so that's a break. And there's nothing between the E and the L, so that's a break. And what I've essentially done is I split the word hello into letters. Kind of not really germane to the point I'm trying to get across, which is that hello is a value, and because it's a value, there are methods you can call on it. There are thousands of methods that you can call on a lot of the built-in types that are in Ruby. This is where a lot of the power of Ruby comes in. Doing this in a lot of other languages is 20 lines of code easy. And you can risk memory leaks that will eventually crash your computer. You can risk corrupting memory that will lead to problems down the line, etc. Ruby says, no, this is a common enough thing to want to do that we're just going to make it a one-line thing, because why not? I've seen people write 100 lines of code in the other languages that I know I could write with a single line in Ruby and have it be more legible and less prone to errors. Oh, okay, and again, a big takeaway. You saw me define an add method earlier, and you pass add two things and it does something with them. This is different. This is fundamentally different. There isn't a split method that I passed the value hello to and asked it a question. There isn't a split that I say, here's a value, do something with it. I am asking the value hello itself to do something with itself, or to answer a question for me. This is the fundamental shift that object-oriented programming gives you. You don't have an infinite list of methods that are floating out there waiting for you to pass some things to do. The value itself is, I don't want to say it's smart enough to do things, but it makes it so that you can just ask it questions and ask it to do things for you. This is incredibly powerful. Now, you've seen a lot of values here. Really quick rundown of some of the methods that are attached to these things that are useful. Length. Hey, the string hello has 5 characters in it. Uppercase. I want the uppercase version of this string. I'm actually going to say h equals hello to make this easier to type, but also because I want you to note that this is not taking the hello string and uppercasing it for me. This is giving me a string that is the uppercase version of hello. Even after calling .upcase on h, h is still a lowercase hello. I have not asked hello to change itself. I have asked it a question. What is this value if I uppercase it? This is the answer to my question, but I have not asked it to do anything with the value. There are methods that will let you do that. If I say upcase with an exclamation mark, that means I want you to make this the uppercase version of that value that it used to be. Now h is capital hello. Not all methods give you the exclamation mark version to let you change the value. This just happens to be one of them. By convention in Ruby, however, any method that alters the value that you are working with will have an exclamation mark in it. So that it's obvious to you by just looking at it, this is going to mutate the value that I'm working with. Note that assignment with an equal sign doesn't require this, because assignment is not a method call on that value. you're doing something else with it. And then one last note before I move on, because man, this is wow. Man, every single value in Ruby, every object, every class has a to_s method. This is incredibly useful. To_s will make a best effort attempt to turn the value that you are working with into a string and return that copy of a thing. The value itself, if I say x equals 15, x2s gives me back a string with a 1 and a 5 in it. X itself is still 15. This is very useful for, it happens transparently when you use puts. Puts will internally call to_s on whatever you pass it and then output that to the screen. But this is very useful when remember when we tried to add some string and then 3 and we got an error? Well, I can say some string plus the string version of 3. Sure. Turn this into a string, which is quote 3 quote, and then I can tag these two strings together easily enough. It's some string 3. There's a lot of value there. Okay, next step up in complexity. Loops. We saw lists. Like that. What can you do with that? Well, here's something you can do. One of the methods available for you in arrays is the each method. I can say this, and I'll go over what every bit of this means in a second, but I can do that. What I've done is I have a list, I have an array with 2 values in it. I have called the each method on it. Each takes a block of commands. And within that command, it will pass each of the values on the array so that you can do something with them, with each of them. Internally, for the commands that are within the scope of that each call, the value that's passed in from the array needs a name so that you can do something with it. In this case, I've called them name. That's what that name in pipes is. It says, pass me each of these values, and then for every one that I see, call it name, run this puts, and then move on to the next item. So I issued that command. No, this is a single command, not a method. This is a method call. This is a single statement so far as Ruby is concerned. And it runs it immediately, like I already does. And it says, okay, word hello, word there, which is what I asked it to do. I asked it to put word and then the word. And then it's done. And at the end of the method, each returns the original value. And this is just a function of how each works. When they wrote the each method internally in Ruby, they decided that it should just return the original value. So I get back the original value so that I can do something else with it. Yes, sir?
Could you written that on one line?
I could have written that on one line. There is a slightly different syntax for that, but yes, absolutely you can. If you want to see what that would look like, that looks like this. Same value, same each method name, but instead of a do and end, I can give commands in curly braces. So you give curly braces, and you still have your piped name, and then your statement. You will generally only see that syntax if the block of code that you're running is a single statement. If it's more than one statement, you can still put them on the same line if you really want to, but it is strongly discouraged because it makes it hard to read. But, oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, you're right, name. And it does the same thing, and it returns the same value, because again, internally it's the same thing. I've just written it slightly differently. I have another example for what you can do with each, but if you have a list of things, they're useless to you unless you can do things with them. Each is one of the several ways that Ruby gives you that you can do things with lists of values. Now, here's a quick example of a thing you can do with lists. And you won't see it here really, but I, on the side, put together this method called poll. It simulates asking some number of people to rank a thing 1 to 10. So I'm going to ask 200 people to rank something 1 to 10, and that gives me back an array with a bunch of values. I put that together because I didn't want to sit here and have to type long arrays by hand. But I can say data equals, and every time I call it, it will give me different values. These are just random values 1 to 10. So I can run a poll of 200 people asking them to rank a thing 1 to 10. And then I can issue the following command, which I will not write because I am bound to mess it up. So I will copy paste it like a good cheater. And you don't necessarily need to understand the entirety of this command, but I just want you to see the power that Ruby gives you. The kind of things you can do with a single line of code. Oh, shenanigans.
I can do that with just a few symbols.
Right.
You need parens on join, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. No.
Well, that was one. Let's go over there. Data count has one too many.
Where? No, data count.
That last ending, or the-
Oh, I think that's what it was. Oh, I think I tried to add in the missing parentheses and I typed in a brace instead. That's what, okay, thank you. Thank you. So this is a single line of code that takes an array with a bunch of numbers in it and it gives you a graph. This is what those numbers look like. Not incredibly useful to us right now, but making something like this happen in some other languages is an ordeal. Again, not the cleanest single line of Ruby code you'll ever see, but that's a lot of work to do in a single line of code. And that's the kind of things that Ruby will let you get away with. And just so that you can see that this is not a fake thing, I'm going to run another random poll and issue the command again. And you can see it just generating graphs for these things. Now, what the command is doing is I'm generating some poll data there, and then I am generating a list 1 to 10, and I'm going over each of those values, and then I'm building out the string, the line, based on how many times I see that value show up in the array. Again, nobody expects you to be able to understand the entirety of that line of code right now, but just see that there's very little friction between a bunch of data and a useful thing. Okay. One more bit of info before we actually hit Rails. Because this is all just Ruby. This is making sure that you understand the code that you're going to be looking at when you run a Rails command and it throws 100 files at you. And you go, what do I do with these? I don't know what is in them. I can open them and look at them, but I don't know what this is. So this is just, again, laying the groundwork for that. We've seen values. We've seen mutating values, playing with them, doing different, making them turn into different things. The real power of computing comes when your computer can make choices, when you can make choices. Enter conditional statements. What a conditional statement is a branch in your code. It's a point in your program where you ask a yes or no question, and then you either run one bit of code or you run a different bit of code. This is where your programs become useful. What is a yes or no question in Ruby? To begin with, the easy answer to that is every value has a yes or no equivalent. Every value except false and nil, both of which you've seen, is considered true. I don't want to use the word truthy because that gets yeah, exactly. I specifically try to stay away from the word truthy. Every value can be evaluated as, is this true or is it false? When you ask that question, false, and nil are false. Everything else is considered true. Even the number 0, which in many languages is considered false. Even an empty string, which in many languages is considered false. Even an empty array. A lot of things that don't seem to have a value are still in Ruby considered true. Only false and nil are false when you ask a yes or no question. Another way to get a yes or no answer out of Ruby is to use a comparison operator. You've seen this before. Less than. When Ruby sees a comparison operator, it knows you're asking a question. Is 3 less than 5? Yes, it is. Is 5 less than 3? No, it's not. Is 3 less than or equal to 7? Yes. There are some additional conditional operators. True and false is false. True or true is true. This goes into binary logic, which we're not going to get into here, but you do get binary logic operators. Not. The not operator is a single exclamation mark. It just means negate this value. Not true is false. Not false is true. Is 3 equals to 5? That errors out. Ruby sees that I have asked it to assign the value 5 to the variable named 3. This is not a valid variable name. There's some rules around what things you can use as variable names in Ruby. I didn't go into them because I didn't want to kind of go down that rabbit hole, despite the fact that I'm going down every other rabbit hole. But suffice to say,
that rabbit hole says you can't begin with a number.
yes, a variable name can't begin with a number. A variable name can't begin with things like question marks. A variable name can't begin with a colon because that's not a variable name. Ruby will think this is a symbol. So there's some things that can and can't be variable names. Again, 3 equals 5 is not a valid comparison operation. If I have the value 3 and I assign it to x, and I say, does x equal 5? This will not give the expected result. What I have done is assign the value 5 to the variable x. X is now 5. The way you ask, are these two things equal, is to say, no, really, are they equal? Equals equals is the comparison operator. This is true for every programming language I think I've ever encountered. It's one of those things that's kind of universal in computing, like the fact that this is how you divide, and asterisk is multiply. Equals equals is the equality comparison operator. So if I ask, is false equals to true? No. Is false equals to false? Yes. So how can you use these values? Now that you know how to generate true and false values out of other things, this is where the if statement comes in. If 3 is less than 5, then I want you to do that. Yeah, that makes sense. The end result of this is nil. Like a method, like everything in Ruby, everything returns a value. If returns a value, in addition to running the statements that you have given it, if returns a value. Its value is whatever the return value of the last thing you ran in it is. In this case, it happened to be a put statement, which returns nil, so I got nil back out of the if statement. But I can do something else. I can say x equals, because I can assign any value I want to x, and everything returns a value, including if statements. X equals if 3 is less than 5, then, and technically I should space it this way to make it more legible. Yep. That was a dumb thing to do. Let's try that again. If 3 is less than 5, yep. Now, instead of a puts, I'm just returning the string yup. This assigns yup to X because the test passed, so the if statement ran the code inside it, which returns the string yup, which is then assigned to X per the X equals. X is now the string yup. Now you can do, if you're interested in, like I said, a conditional statement lets you run one piece of code or another. I can say if 3 is less than 5, and then if 3 is greater than or equal to 5, this is how you would run the two different parts of this test. If 3 is less than 5, then I want you to do that. If 3 is greater than or equal to 5, then do this other thing. These are two separate statements. They are unrelated in every way other than they happen to be testing the same values. This puts a lot of redundant code in your programs. 3 is less than 5, 3 is greater than or equal to 5. If your expressions are much longer than a simple 3 and a 5, this gets very unmanageable very quickly. The shortcut to that is to say if 3 is less than 5, do that, else do that. Now you will either put smaller or puts bigger based on the outcome of that test. A lot of power comes to you with this. If when you combine this with the methods that you know that objects can respond to, this is super useful. You can have very long expressions, which is generally not the best thing in the world, but you can have very complex expressions. You can ask very intricate questions of the data that you have on hand and have your code go one way or another. Okay. Hey, it's time for Rails.
Yay, you're on Rails.
Yeah. Until when did I have?
You moved past it like 20 minutes ago.
Jesus H. Okay.
Till tomorrow.
That's fine.
On Saturday, you got like 45 minutes.
I know. I can keep going. I can go on all night if they'll let me. Or we can end it here. It's up to you guys because I don't want to eat up your time if you guys have things to do. I also don't know when I'm actually going to get booted out of here. Sorry?
I think we're supposed to be out
By 8.
15 minutes.
Okay, I don't know that that's enough for me to get into.
13 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh man, this is a record.
Do it? All right.
The original was 15, right? Yeah.
Okay, jeez.
Can you beat
You got a high bar.
Okay. Okay, wow. Okay, so step 1 to Rails is we've already gone over this, it's a web framework. What does that mean? The framework is the set of tools that lets you build web applications quickly. When you install the Rails gem into your Ruby environment, the Rails package, that gives you access to some of the executables, some of the tools that Rails makes available. One of them is actually an executable called Rails. You can use this to create databases, to store your data. You can use it to define controllers and views and models. We'll get into what those are in a second. You can use it to define routes. You can use it to do all sorts of things. But before we get to that, what are these models and views and controllers and routes? Rails doesn't just let you build web applications. It specifically builds MVC applications. MVC is a design paradigm for web applications that breaks the work of generating web pages into 3 parts: models, views, and controllers. A model is a piece of code that deals with storing and retrieving data from a database or some other data source. It could be a file, it could be a third-party API or web service. Any piece of code whose sole job it is to store or retrieve data can be considered a model and can be written so that it conforms to what Rails considers a model. There's a very specific set of things that a class that you can define needs to satisfy to be considered a Rails model. A view is when you pull up a web page and you go to google.com or you go to any web page, the actual HTML and CSS and JavaScript, all the things that come back to you that your browser renders into a visible page is the view. The piece of code whose job it is to put all those bits together. The piece of code whose job it is to take the 100 tweet records that you have in an array that was pulled from a model and actually build out this pretty list of tweets that are clickable, etc. The part of the web application whose job it is to make that happen is the view. It builds the final presentable result to you. The controller is the in-between part. When I say go to Airbnb, I'll use that because I know for a fact that Airbnb uses Rails to do its stuff. When I say go to Airbnb and pull this web page, my browser goes to Airbnb. It gives a URL that I've typed into my browser, or maybe I've clicked on a Google link and it has a URL attached to it. That URL goes to Airbnb servers. It breaks that apart into a lot of different chunks of data that it needs to look at and inspect to figure out what is it that you need me to do right now, because the server just sees an address. Once the server has done that and broken that up into chunks and knows what part of the code can go fetch the right model data and hand it to the correct view, that part of the web application that does that is the controller. The controller actually goes to the model, fetches data, does whatever it needs to do with it, it mutates it, it does all sorts of neat things like this, and then hands that over to the view and says, here, please render this, and then that's what makes it back to the browser. There's an in-between step there. When I go and I hit Airbnb servers and I give that URL, there is actually a piece of code that is what breaks that URL apart and what decides which controller is going to handle this request. That is the router. Those four components are the four main parts of what makes a web page work. If we had more time, I would go into great detail about how these things work and how they connect and how they talk to each other. We won't get into that right now, but yeah, that's my cue. But just know that those 4 bits are the 4 things that the Rails framework and the Rails executable on the command line will let you manipulate. I can, in a single Rails command, have the system create a database table with certain fields that I need to store, create a view that's very simple but works, that will render that data to me, create a makeshift controller that will handle requests that will let me create those records, edit them, delete them, and add an entry to the router that will tell it, hey, when you see a request come in for this URL, pass it to this controller that I've put together, and it will go and fetch the data from this model that I've already put together, and it will then pass it to this view. Rails lets you do all of that with a single command on the command line. That is where investing the time to learn this stuff really pays off, because making that happen in a lot of other setups takes a lot of time and know-how and effort and trial and error and the right systems, the right configuration. It takes, in some cases, a lot of money. Rails does a lot for you. Again, this is a very surface level view at Ruby and Rails. I can tell you this, there is absolutely no shortage of resources in the world that are out there that want to teach you Ruby. There are sadly nowhere near as many resources that are out there for teaching you, or sorry, that will teach you Rails. There's nowhere near as many resources that will teach you Ruby. There are a lot of courses you can take that will teach you Ruby. But I mean, the number of places you can go and learn Rails things is exponentially larger. And so that's why I like to focus more on the Ruby side, because you can go online right now and find 100 Rails tutorials. Very few of them will go into this kind of detail about what that code you're actually reading is doing. I feel like if I give you a file with 100 lines of code in it and you can read 2 of them, that file will do what you want, but you can't make it do other things. And that's really where the power comes in. I'm gonna leave it at that, and then just go to work like crazy to rip out 60 minutes of what I've just said, so I can condense it down to a sensible time.
You gotta spin up an app.
Yeah, we were getting there.
Okay.
If can you stay till 10?
Sure.
Okay.
I can stay 5 minutes. Rails G new Nesters app. Rails scaffold.
Now I want to do it. I'll go this far. Man, you.
That's pretty far, CD.
Yeah, listen. Oh.
Yay.
Okay, we're not gonna get there.
No doc. Should no doc.
Yeah, listen. I never say that, and every single time I go, why don't I just add this to my as an alias? Oh, build problem with probably Postgres. SQLite.
You don't have SQLite?
How do I not have SQLite on here? Oh, probably because this is Ruby 2.3. Because I have the Rails bridge installed on here, and it's not. Fun fact: GCC 7 will not.
RBNV install.
Yeah, GCC 7 will not build Ruby 2.3.
Really?
Yes, you have to install GCC.
2.3.1?
No, it will not.
Not even any of the 2.3s here?
I didn't try all of them, but you have to install GCC 6, change your GCC alias to point to that, and build Ruby, and then change it back so your system doesn't explode.
I have no idea.
Yeah. Anyway, well, we made it pretty far in the process. Because of specifics pertaining to how I have my system configured right now, unfortunately, the Rails new command failed halfway
you didn't
through.
follow convention.
Because I didn't follow convention. However, the command I just issued on here, that this Rails new hello, if that had actually run to complete, if I wasn't an idiot, that would have run to completion, and I would have at the end of this process had a running website on my system. It wouldn't do much out of the box because I have literally issued one command, but I would have a web server available to me. I would have a number of configuration files already set up for me. I would have a lot of the under the hood work. Say it?
I said it's still a variable.
Oh yeah. I would have an incredible amount of under the hood work done for me without even taking into account the fact that one more command would have created databases and spun up views and given me URLs that I can send to people that will let them do things with this Mickey Mouse website I've put together on my system with 2 commands. So we'll leave it at that. And I'm sorry we didn't have more time. Okay. What is the likelihood that we can turn Railsbridge into a 3-day event, like on the fly?